You can find peace of mind. Take your time, free your mind. You can find peace of mind. Take your time, free your mind. You can find peace of mind. Redefine, realize, deep inside we divine. Come on in the room. We're going to get started in just a minute. Share this out, please. Just take a moment and hit that plus sign to share this with folks. Love yourself, know your worth, you're enough. I know times are kind of tough right now. When you'd rather be in love, you're a diamond in the rough. Love yourself, know your worth, you're enough. Love yourself, know your worth, you're enough right now. Love yourself, know your worth, you're enough. Love yourself, know your worth, you're enough right now. Love yourself, know your worth, you're enough. Take your time, free your mind. You can find peace of mind. Take your time, free your mind. You can find peace of mind. Take your time, free your mind. I'm gonna get started in just a moment. You can find peace of mind. Take your time, free your mind. You can find peace of mind. Take your time, free your mind. You can find peace of mind. Take your time, free your mind. You can find peace of mind. Take your time, free your mind. You can find peace of mind. All right, welcome. We're going to go on and get started here. And I want to just lay the context of where we're coming from today, because this discussion was born out of a discussion on last week that we had. The book of the month and the focus of the month is mental freedom. And we are using the 30-day mental diet. And my love offering to mental health has been sending out daily love notes rather than just stand aside and watch suicide after suicide and not understand that something is happening in the culture. I felt moved to level up during this so-called Black History Month. And so level up in terms of really being a contribution, because I had never really taken on this aspect of the conversation. I've had small conversations. And so those of you who don't know, I'm La Tonia Taylor, affectionately known as the Rev Coach, the Juicy Spirit Mama, the priestess of purpose, pleasure, passion, and profits. I am a spiritual psychology educator. I work in the areas of love, sex, and money, and how they all have a frequency that contributes to our mental wealth and mental health. And some of you may know my work and seen some of my work on Eon Will Fix My Life, but I've been in this field for over 20 years. So I am not coming to offer therapy or anything like that. And if you're watching on Instagram or YouTube, we welcome you to join us on Clubhouse to be a part of the discussion. We know that there's a lot of censoring going on many of the other platforms. So it's really great to be able to really connect. And I want you to go on and raise your hand if you know you are. In fact, I see another special guest, Derek, if you can go on and raise your hand so I can make you a speaker. And then I can put you on mute. And when it's your time to speak, because we want to hear your story. Anybody in here that that I've invited has a story, and we all have stories. And even though you may feel like, Dad, I don't want to talk about that. That's exactly why we are doing this space in a safe space, in an environment where you can hear your options for mind, body, and spirit wellness. So I'll just tell my story and then introduce our special guests, who I feel are going to be the meat and potatoes of this discussion, because they are two former pastors. And I'll tell you more about them in just a moment. So even though you see Rev Coach in my title, don't get it twisted. I am not traditional in any way, shape, form, or fashion, although I came through tradition. I'm born in the South. I had the good girl syndrome and didn't even really know it, because I consider myself the rebel and the black sheep. Imagine that. And because I was considered the rebel and the black sheep for not going along to get along in my family, asking questions, telling on predators, those types of things, I felt very punished in my own family for many years. And I don't know if it contributed to me seeking refuge in religion, because I didn't really fit in my family, it felt like, and I didn't feel the love, so to speak. Maybe I was the sensitive child. And so I remember always having a love for God. It wasn't just when I joined the Nation of Islam at 18 years old, but even when I was in Catholic school, I was drawn to, I got straight A's in theology. I thought I was going to be a nun. I was really drawn to the life. So I've always had a ministerial call. And later, I went through, left traditional religion. Let me say this too. I also on planes met friends traveling from the South, from Mississippi to Washington, D.C. to spend my summers, got attracted to a Buddhist and was instantly attracted to chanting Nam Myoho Kinge Ringo and Rio, excuse me, and being able to chant. And so that was the beginning really of my family, when people started looking at me crazy, right? Like, what is this girl doing? So then later on, fast forward the tape, I decided to become Muslim, and I stopped eating pork. And I'm just moving different. I got married at 19. The context of my life and everything changed. My awareness happened in terms of business. So I'm a young girl, in having a good time at Southern University in Baton Rouge. I wasn't really seeking to become a Muslim, but I always have been a truth seeker. I've always explored new things. I've always been called to non-traditional paths, so to speak. Long story short, I've spent my years in the Nation of Islam, but I have another wake-up call. And I start to study, because I've always been one who studied anything that I'm a part of. And so as I'm studying what I'm a part of, somebody said, hope there's a replay. I think the replay is on in Clubhouse. It would be nice for you to join us in Clubhouse. But I am going to capture your comments from Instagram and YouTube. So I left the Nation of Islam after spending some time studying metaphysics and And I did that quietly because I remember introducing the science of mind to some of the sisters in New Orleans, and they looked at me like I had two heads. And I remember them saying, you know, what are you bringing that in here for? And shout out to my sister from the mosque, who is still in the nation, just to show you, just because you study other things doesn't mean you have to necessarily leave, but it's the control, the fear-based religions that think that you can, and people in them. And so I shout out to her because she stood her ground. She's still in the nation, and I was affected. I was one of those affected by that, but I didn't stop studying. And so when I went through my own personal journey as a young wife, and something was happening in my spirit, in my mind, I started seeking other ways to heal myself. And it led me right up out of traditional religion. And I thought I'd never do it again. Then I got called to ministry, even as a metaphysician, and free. And it wasn't the first call. I've been called several times, through other things. And currently right now called again and initiated in the Lukumi tradition as an Obatala priest. But I've been called to Tantra. I've been called to to plant medicine. Had many calls that I have answered. And I know that many people don't give themselves permission to answer many calls. And so I'm not saying that my life has to be your life, but I guarantee you that I can tell you I have had to still go back and clean up and clear those core beliefs that came from those spaces that you thought, you know, hey, I left that. It doesn't leave you just like that. So when we think about mental freedom today, I want you all to be able to listen to someone else's story and have courage to be able to tell your own, share your own, connect with someone else here in the room. So I want to introduce my guests, who always, they're known as two Dope Soulz. You always see them together on social media platforms. I really didn't realize how they are pastors, were pastors. I really didn't get that. And they started telling me their story, and I said, no, hold it for the room. All I knew was there were two people from my hometown that were also metaphysicians and talking this talk on another level in terms of the paranormal. They are polyamorous. They are just really doing a whole 180 and another 180 again. And so when I found out that there were some other people who were from my hometown, I was like, oh my God, instantly you want to support them, because you don't meet a lot of people from a place like Mississippi, the Bible Belt, who are living out loud. I still hear from my girlfriend Karen, who's in the room, and I'm sure she's gonna have something to say, where she's like, yeah, girl, you was always different in school. And I'm like, really? Damn, I didn't really think I was that different. But she said I was, so I'll take her word for it. And so I want to introduce to you George and Sheila Strouder. And I want you to please take yourself off mute and share who's going to start sharing their story first.
Hello, I am George, and they call me just George.
Hi, I'm Sheila, and they call me Sheila Speaks.
And so we are also known as Dope Soulz, and we've been married. Coming up this year is our 25th year. And it's funny that we're here because we met in the church.
Absolutely.
We met in the church. And so my story pretty much is really simple. Actually more simpler than hers probably. I was born and raised. I was bred. I was indoctrinated. I was everything that I knew about church, Christianity, God, Jesus, the gospel, anything. It was ingrained in me. I was brainwashed. And so I tell people all the time, there's a lot of things that might be said. I don't know who's going to slip in and out of the room, but let me put this out there. There's a lot of things that might be said because there may be a lot of people that are curious. There are people trying to figure out their life, their route, their road. I'm so glad that RevCoach made the statement that she's had many callings, so many things that she has been called to or attracted to, and that there are some that are afraid to embrace many callings, and so it's nothing wrong with reinventing yourself. Nothing wrong with that. But there'll be many things that'll be said today that if you don't have a point of reference for, you retreat back to your old self. It's called cognitive dissonance. And so I want to make the statement that I want you to have an open mind and an open heart. And I love the fact that she is providing a platform to have many voices, not just one voice. I can't wait to hear Brother Derek's story. We just heard, I didn't know your full story, RevCoach.
Not at all, right?
Right. And it's beautiful, it's encouraging, it's inspiring. And it's a lot of similarities there. For me, my story is real cut and dry. I was born and raised in the church. My dad was a devout Catholic. Watch this, and we can probably talk a little bit about that later. A devout Catholic at the time that I was born was church hurt. He had stopped going to church, and he had relied on my mother, who was a devout Baptist, to put religion in me. So my dad's religious piece was he would do things around the home, like have Bible study with us, or not necessarily Bible study, but read the Bible from Genesis to Revelation. So we read several chapters at a time every Sunday evening. My mom would do her thing with me by taking me to church. He vowed never to set foot in church again. He was dead set. He was a Catholic, so he was dead set against Baptists. He was, prejudiced against Black Baptists, for various reasons. And but the Catholic Church had hurt him because when he got a divorce from his previous marriage, they would not annul it so he could marry my mom. And so he got into it with the priest or the father of the house of that parish or what have you. And he vowed never to step foot back into church again. Now, what's crazy about that, he didn't. He kept his word until I came back home to Mississippi and started pastoring. And he was one of our chief elders for the entire 10 years that we had the church, right? And so that was crazy. So I had a church hurt father, and I had a mother that was a Baptist that was dragging me to church. I was there from the womb all the way up. So I started out as an usher. I was in the choir. I was a junior deacon until I became a reverend myself. And so I spent the first 20 years of my adult life as a preacher, as a gospel preacher, as a bishop, with Sheila by my side. And she'll tell you a bit of her story as my co-pastor. And so, to be honest with you, that's what I wanted to say, that I'm glad that you said that you did and touched all those areas and things before you found where you are now, RevCoach, because what people don't realize is that if you're called to something, you're called to something. Now, you may think, RevCoach, that you have been called to multiple things, but that's not the case. You're called to the same thing on multiple levels or in different arenas. If you are a healer or a light worker, you're going to find yourself in one area or another, either as a doctor or a nurse or a hospice or a caretaker or a preacher or a life coach or a motivational speaker or somebody that's leading a spiritual movement or what have you. And every awakening that you have and every call that you have will be a call and a pull in that general direction. You can never escape who you are. And everything that you listed, RevCoach, is healer all over you. You know what I'm saying? Light worker all over you. And so, to make a long story short, I was always destined to be the shaman that I am. I was always destined to be a natural healer. I was always destined to be a light worker. I just had to find myself. And I was cursed with the lottery of birth, as so many of all of you are. Everyone, when you are born, you don't have a choice who your family is. When you are born, you don't have a choice what your God is, what you subscribe to, even if you subscribe to a God, what your faith is, what your spirituality, what your routines, what your tastes and practices are. Even taste in music, taste in color. It comes from the culture that you are born and bred in. And so my only vice is, is the fact that it took me as long as it did to start thinking for myself, because the wake-up call for me, what made me change is I got into a mindset that I was following something that was given to me, but I was not following something that was born in me. If that makes any sense. That was in me. Because we are all born with amnesia, but we say that we're born with amnesia, but it not really. What happens is something snaps in the toddler age. Something snaps in us based on the culture that we are bred in, and we forgot everything that we were supposed to remember. And so now, during these several awakenings, because it's not just one awakening, through several awakenings, we find out that that we that we have not been ourselves. I think, Sheila, you put it. Tell them what you told me when we were going through one of our little awakenings. You said that you dealing with me. I was doing shadow work, and you said I was following my clone.
It was a time where you were doing shadow work, and I expressed to you that a lot of us, well, actually all of us, walk our lives out in a clone view. We're not walking out the true self. So when we present ourselves to people, we're not presenting the true self. We're not presenting the true emotion. We're not presenting the true call, the true purpose of who we are and what we come in their life for.
So would you say that that's the hurt part?
That is definitely the hurt part.
Because would it be church hurt?
Absolutely. We cover up. We build a world in our minds, and in that world in our minds, it says that this is who I am, but in reality, it's not who I am. It's who I present ourselves to be to people. And so, what we have to do in life is, will the real you please stand up? I really want to know who you are.
That's so good.
And we don't get to know the true person because we all walk behind a brick wall.
Right. Wait, before y'all two preachers start preaching and teaching, I know that y'all do this like I do. I want to get Sheila's story. I want to get your story first.
Absolutely.
So Sheila, tell us a little bit about your background, and we're gonna get into all that juicy stuff in a minute.
Absolutely. So for me, I'm born and raised in the church. And for me, on the other spectrum, I didn't have the strong parents in church like George. My mother and father went to church with us, but we were more of the singers in the church. You know, we were the ones that everybody came to hear sing. So my upbringing was more so, you know, the musical part of church. It wasn't until I became older that I began to want to know more about, you know, what the Bible really is talking about, but basis what people told me versus what people told me. And it was not until, to be honest with you guys, it wasn't until I actually met George that I began to open up, even in reading the Bible. And even when I read the Bible, I didn't read the Bible. As you know, as they say, you know, study to show yourself approved. I didn't do that because I really didn't care to do it, because there was always something in me that pulled me away from the church, more so than pulled me to the church. I never understood that until, to be honest with you guys, until maybe 2 years ago. And I'm 48 years old. And I just realized that I never really wanted to be in church. I never really wanted to be the pastor. I never really wanted to be a co-pastor. I never wanted to be the evangelist. I always knew that there was something in me for people. I've always been a healer. That's who I am. I've always been that person. And I've always been called a witch and didn't understand that. But now I understand it better. I understand who I am as a person. And so my story is pretty simple. I've been in church all my life, never was really called to church, but when I met my husband, because what women do, let me just say this, what women do when we meet a man that we know is a good man and we don't want to let him go, we become who he needs us to be. And that's what I did. I became everything that my husband needed, but in the same breath, I was missing myself and not being true to myself in those moments. We talked about this all the time. We talk about how, you know, when he, you know, became a evangelist, you know, I had to be his missionary. You know, I was just that person, and whatever he did, I had to do it because I needed to be a part of something that was great, and I knew it was great.
Oh, that's good. I don't want you to forget that right there. I don't want you to forget. You saying some heavy stuff right here for the sisters in the room already. So don't forget, we're gonna come back to that. Continue.
Okay. So I was always the wife that was the wife. I will push my man until I push him off the ledge to jump. Okay. That's who I've always been to him. That's who I'll always be. And that's who he is to me. He pushes me. And in the moments that he would push me, he always knew that there was a part of me that was not wanting to be where I was at. But because I was so into making sure that our life was good as a wife, as a mother, as a pastor, as somebody's pastor, and I need to be pastor, but you know, I need to give you what you need, because it really don't matter what I need right now. And so those were the things that I dealt with as a pastor in church. And I'm so grateful today that I had that experience, because with that experience, it gives me a better understanding of how to present myself now as a woman that is a light worker, you know, and what the world calls a witch. But I love it. I love all parts of it, and I love all parts of me. So that's my story up until the point that I met George.
Okay, and you said you were going to share a little bit more about what they told you about you all even coming together, right?
Absolutely. So with George and I George was in his home church, and I became a part of that church. And when I became a part of that church, I was already a married woman with previously married. I was previously married before. And so when I came to the church, before I met George, I was an anointed, called, wonderful, beautiful person inside and out. And I was going to reach the nations through my calling, through my anointing, and all these things. According to the people that told me this, which was at the time his mother and his aunt, and his uncle, which were the pastors and co-pastors of the church. So as time went on and I began to know George and we began to know each other, we began to be drawn closer and closer together, we became engaged. George proposed to me. And the night that he proposed to me, we went to the church and we wanted to tell everybody how excited we were, because all these people already said how beautiful I am and they know how beautiful he is, and now we're beautiful together. But when we announced that we were getting married, our hell broke loose. And
in the church
that night, and I became the worst person in the world. I became a witch. I was an adulterer. I was a whore, a Jezebel.
Oh my!
Because I accepted his proposal. Right. His proposal. And so the same people that lifted me were the same people that tore me down, which was his family.
Yep. Facts. And so because of that, my mom and I didn't speak for 3 years. And so before she passed, I only got 2.5, 3 years with her before she passed, because she finally came back around, because she realized, she didn't win that one. And so it was terrible. It was really terrible. A lot of other moving pieces in that. And it was something that almost destroyed her. I was going through my own thing because I had just lost my family, that I was very close to, because I was the only child. I was the only grandson, the only nephew. I was in position to be the pastor of the church next, all that. And so, all of that was ripped at the same time, because I clung to, my twin flame, somebody that I found, and I was 19 and all that. And so I went out into the world without the support of my family that I've had all this time. So that was hurt that I was dealing with on my own, while my wife was dealing with it on an entirely different level, because she pretty much, people don't really know the whole story, but there's a book coming out with all the good and all the tea is going to be in it. But she was pretty much, but her first, she was pretty much put out the church. Literally, she was the vice president of the choir and everything. And she was pretty much put out the church. They almost literally made her wear the scarlet letter. It's crazy.
I actually had the scarlet letter. If I had to say such a thing, I actually had it, because the very mantle that they put on me, they tore it off and gave me a different one. But I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful now at 48 for
Absolutely.
that. Because I've released that pain. I released that hurt, because I understand that they didn't understand what they were doing, but they were just really pushing me to my real calling. They were really just pushing me to my real purpose. And that's who I am today. That's who I'm becoming. And I'm becoming the person that I didn't know I was, that they saw. And see, that's the problem with churches, and that's the problem with pastors. And that's one reason why we vowed to never do what was done to us as pastors, and that's hurt our people to the point that we would make them feel one way, but in reality, we thought a different way. And so that's what hurt us the most, is that you told us one thing, you built us up and told us this is who we are, this is what we're going to be in the Lord. But then when the time came around that you didn't agree with a part of our lifestyle, then now we have become this person that is evil, or for the sake of the word evil, whatever that means. But we had a really hard time our first 3 years of our marriage, because of people and family that told us we wouldn't have 2 months to be married. But now we're 25 years in.
Cursed our children.
Everything.
Well, cursed all of our future children.
It was
awful. From the pulpit.
And these are pastors.
They would have Bible study, and before Bible study on Wednesday nights, they would have prayer meetings. Witches circles, basically.
That's pretty much
prayer meetings. Kneel down at the altar and would literally pray against our marriage at the church. My mother had a group of sisters, her and my aunt.
And so that's what we dealt with.
And what was the turning point for you all? Because most people who go through something so severe, they, the first thing is usually anger, grief, and feeling lost. What was the turning point where you all became these occultists and metaphysicians, and
Oh wow, that's another show.
Okay, can you just do a taste like I did?
Let me tell you why I said that, because I apologize to the audience that we didn't give a timeline, but the story we're telling is literally 25 years ago, almost 30 years ago. Right. We were kids. Right. So after that, fast forward 3 years from that, my mom passed. By then, we were national evangelists traveling the world on national platforms, television, radio, what have you. By the time my mom passed, we were pastoring in Atlanta, Georgia. I did her funeral. We came back to Mississippi to do her funeral. There were like about maybe 70 to 80 some people around the altar or what have you. And so I felt the call, like RevCoach said, to come back to Mississippi. We put a pastor of the church in Atlanta, and we came back to Mississippi, and we pastored Mississippi for 10 years. So, fast forward, we pastored in Houston and Louisiana and all over. So fast forward to 25 years later, we closed the church down. Well, before we closed the church down in Mississippi in 2010, we were doing one church in 2 locations. We had opened up a smaller church in Houston. We were trying to do both locations. We were successful about 2 years. And around 2014, the year that your father passed, is the year that we decided to shut the church down in Mississippi because we were no longer there. We were in Houston. Right. We had a youth pastor over it, and they weren't coming to see him like they were coming to see us. So we had to shut it down, right? So 2014 kind of ended our traditional pastoral. Yeah. And so we moved to Florida. We kept thinking that we were going to pastor again.
Yeah, we just kept pushing to be pastors wherever we went, to be pastors, pastor.
For about 5 years.
And in that, realizing that something's off because it's not doing what it was doing before.
Right.
And I know for him, for me, I was just like, oh, I'm good. Right. I ain't got to go pastor nobody.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. Because I need to get me together, so I really could care less about the pastor.
But we were still hugging the faith,
hugging on to the faith, and holding on to a hope and a prayer that things would get better and the Lord would deliver us. Right. In reality, we realized that all those things were already in us that we needed.
Right. I realized that the same power, because I've always been, when I was in the church, I was a faith healer. I was on the Pentecostal side of things, where we talked in tongues and we raised the dead and healed the sick, and we was on the mystical side of Christianity. So I was always a healer.
We were always non-traditional, though.
Yeah, always non-traditional. Yeah. And so when I realized that the stuff that I do now, like Reiki and bioenergetic healing and all that, I realized it's the same thing that I did in the church, laying on of hands, same thing that Jesus did. And then when you study history of Reiki, which is a tradition that I was bred in, you find out that the founder actually got the idea from studying Christ. Right. You understand what I'm saying? So I realized that the same authority that I had then, I have now, but just more of it, because I realized I'm not depending on anything outside of me. I'm depending on what's already been placed in me. Right. And that's the difference. Right. And so the story is funny because I actually started to turn first, and she kind of watched on the sidelines. It kind of scared her a little bit.
The reason why I wasn't with her, I told him when I married
you told me something.
25 years, I said, as long as you follow Jesus,
I'm going to
follow you. You stop following Jesus, I was like,
a part of you was kind of happy.
I was like, happy, but I was
the other side of you was like,
leave. I'm going to go.
This some BS.
He done lost his whole mind. What? Jesus, man? Are you lost your? And so when he turned and he was watching stuff and he was like, come watch this with me. And I was like, I don't want to watch that. You watch that stuff. I don't want to see. I was denying the very thing that I was following all my life.
Right. And fighting
at the same time.
Okay. That's the part where okay, George, I want you to pick back up on when you started turning, but you said something about them calling you a witch. Why were they calling you a witch, Sheila, while you was heavy in the church?
Well, I believe that the reason why it was because they saw something in me and didn't understand what it was. And because it wasn't a pastor or a prophet evangelist, they they just felt like it may have been the opposite of what they knew.
RevCoach, they called her a witch because they believe, or they felt like that if my mind and heart got turned like that, she had to put something in my food, and she had to put a spell on me, and all, you know what I'm saying? They said that.
So they were intimidated by her divine feminine power. Okay.
They were intimidated by her divine feminine power, and a real goddess that stepped in my life, and I learned what to worship, and they was intimidated by it.
Okay, got it. All right. So you started turning, and what does that mean for you? Because you know, Bishop Carlton Pearson talks about the moment he started turning, right? He talks about the moment when he started to question some things, and when he got answers, he was shocked. You know, he just couldn't put everybody in a heaven and a hell. And then, you know, that was his moment in his office studying. And I remember my moment was also studying, because see, a lot of people don't know, and a lot of Christian people don't know, when they call names and say that that's not it, other people are studying. And so in the nation, you would study the Bible, the Quran, the dictionary, and whatever the lesson was. So I learned how to exegete the text before I even went to be ordained. And so I was exegeting text, breaking down words, going into the etymology of words. And that's when spirit speaks to you, because you're breaking the spell off of your own mind at that time. So I remember when I started shifting, even in the Nation of Islam, and in study groups, there were certain things that I think I remember knowing I couldn't say out loud, because I know they would be like, oh no, what's going on with her? You know, the same thing. So I held it in my belly for a long time. So how did it happen for you? Because you were still pastoring, right?
Say it again.
You were still pastoring when you started turning, or you had stopped pastoring?
Well, that's what I was going to say, is that it happened in blocks. So while I was pastoring and heavy in my pastoralship, a lot of my doctrine and philosophy started turning. Like, for instance, how I felt, like the way I was raised, you know how we were raised in the Bible Belt concerning homosexuality and heaven and hell. So, of course, in my pastoralship, all that started to change. You know what I'm saying? And for both of us.
Absolutely.
Right? And then, while we were pastoring, we stopped believing in hell. Or at least we believed that there was a hell, but we believed that nobody's going there. We've had it twisted.
Mental place, but not physical.
So my real turn, let me tell you what the biggest issue really was. Just like what you said, I was the same way. I knew how to exegete the text. I had my own Bible college.
Wow, George, you was in there.
That's what I'm trying to tell you. So the biggest curse for me was the Bible itself. I read too much of it. I understood too much of it. I read it too many times. I was able to relevate out of it. I said, yeah. You know what I'm saying? Which caused me to ask more questions and to do more research, and to make me ask myself, why have I not been thinking for myself?
And the funny part is about the fact that he said he read the Bible so much that he understood it, that's why he ran from it. I read it less, and that's why I ran even more, because I didn't understand what I did read.
Right.
Oh, wow. Okay, that's good right there, though. That's good. So
we realized, and so what happened was, like, you know, she was a little nervous, and she was like, "What are you doing?" And I used to have certain programs on at night to fall asleep. She said, "I don't want to hear that," and you know, she didn't say that, but I don't want to hear that later while I fall asleep at night. You know, so listen, but what happened was, she looked up, and all those shows that I was watching or listening to, she looked up, and I had my own show. You know, that's when I started Just George Streaming Consciousness on Facebook about 4 years ago. And she was like, what the what? And, you know, I'm teaching, you know, and this is the crazy thing. I'm teaching while I'm still growing, and while I'm still learning, and while I'm still allowing some things to fall off. Because when I started, because like I said, it was in phases. I didn't just drop everything all together. First, it was, you know, pastoring, and then it was the church, and then it was, you know, question Christianity, and then it was, well, you know what, I still believe in Jesus. Then I let Jesus go. And then when I still believe in God, then I realized ain't no God bigger than me. So, I went through phases of it to get.
Don't y'all run out of the room because he said that. Because I know some of y'all who think you free. Don't run because he said that there's no God bigger than him. We're gonna break it down a little bit more. We still got to hear from Derek.
And I said kind of to this. I said, you don't have a point of reference. Don't be afraid. Stay and listen to the whole thing.
That's right.
And so I went through phases and blocks to get to where I am. And guess what? I'm still growing, just as you and just as Sheila. We're still evolving. We're still putting pieces together, and we're still learning parts of ourselves. And I think the fun part now is that I think we've gotten to know ourselves. And I think out of 25, 30 years, we're having fun learning each other all over again. That's the fun part.
Definitely right. I do know that when he began his transition out of the church, and I'm going through my own things. I said, I told this man, if he ever leave the church, leave Jesus, I'm gone. I'm done.
You see, you still here though.
And I ain't going nowhere, real.
Y'all can call me La Tonia. Clubhouse just puts it here for some reason like that.
Gotcha, La Tonia.
And so want to put some respect on your name.
Oh, y'all funny.
And so I was, watching him, and as I always do, I always have, because before he was my husband, he was my mentor. Before he was my lover, he was my friend. Oh. And so those are parts of him that I'm always going to be reaching for the parts of me to be, enlightened and healed. And so as I'm watching him go through and talking to other people and watching these shows and want me to watch them with him and sending me articles, and I'm like, leave me alone. Just leave me alone. Sending me books, read this book. I didn't read the Bible. So I'm not gonna read no book. Come on, man. And so I'm just like, no, I'm not going to hell with you. This is what I'm saying in my mind. I ain't going to hell with you. You're not sending me to hell with you. And I ain't believe it. That's funny. So I went back to that, the burning in hell, the lake of fire and all that. Because I'm like, what is going on with my husband? Oh my God. Oh Lord, I'm losing my mind trying to figure out what is going on with him. And then as the more he talks, and then after a while I'll go, and when he ain't looking,
I started having Bible study.
Yeah, when he ain't looking, I'll go watch a video or go read an article or do some research myself. And then he kept saying, one day you gonna tell me you don't want Jesus no more. I said, I don't care what you say, I'm always need Jesus. I don't know what you're talking about. And one day I just woke up. And I said, you know what? For lack of better words, Jesus. I'm done. I got to find out who Sheila is, because I don't know me.
And boy, while I'm trying to
find Jesus, I didn't even know me.
But did you find out? My God.
And now that I
love you.
I'm free, La Tonia.
Mm-hmm.
I'm freer at 48 than I've ever been in my life. And I'm okay with it. And I'm okay with who don't like it.
And how did you get there, Sheila? Because that takes some time.
A lot of shadow work.
Lots of shadow work. I went through shadow work so bad last year, I thought I would probably die. But I dealt with a lot of things within myself that has never been dealt with. My childhood, things that I pushed back that I didn't want to remember, issues with my parents, issues with my siblings, things that most people don't want to talk. I'm sorry, things that most people in the African American community don't want to talk about.
Absolutely.
I dealt with those things, and then I dealt with people. And I said when I turned 48, which was just last year, that I will not enter into the new year with any issues with anybody. I'm going to tell everybody how I felt. And in that, I began to write letters. I began to call people. I began to text people and tell everybody how I felt, how they treated me over the years, and how I felt they did and what they did to hurt me. And that was my release. I'm writing a book now, and it's called Grow to Glow. And I'm not glowing today without the growth that I've been through. And so that's how I'm transmitting. That's how I'm releasing. I'm just saying tomorrow, I wrote a quote on Facebook, and it said something to this sugar in. Today did not do anything wrong to you. Stop being disrespectful, because yesterday messed you up.
That's good right there.
Today deserves another chance. And so every moment, every day that I wake up, I am not thinking about what happened. If George and I get in a disagreement 2 seconds ago, it's gone for me right now, period. And him as well. That's how we live our life now. Every moment, we don't waste any time on stuff that's past.
So how far out are you two, would you say, from the whole church identity? How far out are you from it?
Oh, we are not in it at all. We are completely out.
No. I mean, how many years has it been? Because I heard you say,
about 5 now.
Okay, 5 years.
About 5 years.
I mean, totally, really disconnected. Now, what's interesting? We still speak in churches.
Do you now?
Yes, we still speak in churches, but we don't preach the gospel. Of course, people know what we believe. In fact, I don't know if you're familiar with Bishop George Bloomer, the General Warfare.
Yeah, actually, you know what? Larry Reed had a panel, and I know Larry Reed can be controversial for some people, but I'm gonna tell you, he's going through his own awakening.
Yeah.
And
he's a friend of ours. He's a friend of ours.
Get out of here! I'm not surprised. Well, he had a panel with Bloomer, with Pearson, and another sister named Yvette, and it was profound, the discussion. Right. I highly recommend anyone who is listening to look at it, because the sister says some powerful things. I'll look it up while we're talking, but go ahead.
Right. So I remember that interview. So Bloomer actually was my bishop for 20 plus years. I was on his board of bishops.
You better stop. Get out of here.
So what's crazy is we have a few surprises coming up, but I'm actually, he does a show called Workology, the General's Briefing, that comes on every day. And on the 25th, I'll actually be featured on there, and we're having a whole episode called The Bishop and the Shaman, or The Bishop Meets the Shaman. And
that's wonderful.
It's going to be bananas.
That is amazing. Bishop Pearson has become a friend of mine, and when he first made his transition, and the very churches that he condemned, New Thought, you know what I mean, Metaphysics, all of those people accepted him. Those were the first churches to invite him to speak. And that's what humbled him. That humbled him some more. And then, of course, he went to become, what really humbled him is when he went to lead Johnny Coleman's church, who is also in my spiritual court, the Reverend Dr. Johnny Coleman out of Chicago. Peace and blessings upon her. Everybody should know Reverend Dr. Johnny Coleman's name, who studies metaphysics, because she's the Black woman who came out of the New Thought field when they were still calling Black people Negroes. And many people don't know that about the Unity Church's history. And so that's why she left and did her own thing. And she was a profound prosperity teacher. She did not allow her members. She said, don't drive into my parking lot with no junk. So she was one of the first prosperity teachers, a Black woman that many people have built their identity on as well. So I want to pause for a minute, George, and I want to bring in Derek Kelly, who's going to share something with us. But let me just show you how spirit works, for me at least. I hear, I listen, I move when I hear. The same way I was asking who to bring. I have several sisters in my tribe who either have been in traditional ministry, have been on the skirt or on the edge of traditional ministry. Several sisters who have gone through my programs, and several friends who are friends of mine. And I thought, I want to do some new energy. So when I saw you, I reached out and you all were available. But something in my belly leaped when I saw Derek Kelly's piece just today, I think, on releasing. And I reached out to the brother to ask him, could he come and read the piece, because I don't ever want to leave people worse than I found them. And I was saving him towards the end, but then he says, sure, I'll come as a former PK. So come on, Derek, and introduce yourself and tell people who you are, what you do, and we'll save your piece in just a moment.
Well, thank you, RevCoach. It was actually an honor and blessing. It was kind of, sporadic, but I'm always up for the challenge. My name is Derek Kelly. Some know me as the Forex Yogi. I'm also a PK. Thank you to Dope Soulz. This story was amazing. Very inspiring, right? Very inspiring. I appreciate your journey. Let me start by first saying that, I'm one to believe that we create our life sometimes without details. And we think our lives into existence, we speak our lives into existence, but sometimes it's without details. So, again, I'm a PK, delivered without breath, something before I was stillborn. Stayed in an incubator for 6 weeks alone. My mother had two miscarriages prior to delivering me, so the doctors had informed her that I wouldn't survive. So she didn't want to become emotionally attached to me. So that cognitive development that's needed as an infant, I didn't actually see that from my biological mother. Doctors and nurses also didn't give me that cognitive development. So I was kind of left alone in this incubator, questioning why I was here. And I can tell you about that in another story, how I knew that was a conversation that I had with myself. After 6 weeks, I was able to breathe more on my own after having tubes on my head and on my chest. My mother was able to take me home. At the age of 2, I actually drank some Old English furniture polish and OD'd. This is my second death after being delivered. With very weak lungs, my mother was pretty much forced to move to the South. So she bought property in a little small town called Emporia, Virginia. It was a 13-unit motel, had a big major unit in the middle. We lived inside a 3-unit apartment upstairs where our church was actually housed downstairs. So being a Pentecostal apostolic pastor, either you went to church or you heard it. There was no getting away from it. I remember the days of shut-ins, going to church on Friday evening at 7 o'clock and getting out on Sunday. You better call the Holy Ghost while you was there, right? They beat on your chest and beat on your back and you thank you, Jesus, thank you, Jesus, thank you, Jesus, thank you, Jesus all day long, right? Today I know that's considered as child abuse.
Come on now.
Child abuse.
Yes.
Keeping a child in church from 7 o'clock in the morning to 3 o'clock in the morning, that's child abuse. And for anyone who's also a PK, I know I have some other PKs on the line, you understand what it feels like to be neglected and to feel abandoned being a PK. Because your parents' sole mission is to continue to build the church. And you're left on the sidelines. I tell many people, it's not much difference in being a PK than being raised by parents who are addicted to drugs. Yeah, that's true. That's true, Derek. You feel the same sense of abandonment. You feel the same sense of neglect. You don't get that nurturing. You don't get those words of affirmation. You're always on the sideline, and you're having to play your part to protect your role inside this dysfunctional dynamic. And so I did that for many years. At 7 years old, I was actually introduced to one of my first spiritual gifts, of the gift of singing. By the age of 8, I was a national child prophet. They pimped my gift. And I wasn't even conscious enough to even understand what was going on. By the age of 12, I was actually at a mental institution, a psych unit, suicidal and homicidal, ready to kill my parents and myself at 12 years old. By 16 years old, I was struck out on drugs. By 19, I was struck out on crack. By 20, I was in prison. And so I said all that to say that, when you don't know who you are, and you're still seeking for love, and you're still seeking for validation, and being a PK, I did everything it asked me to do. I'll never forget, I did my inner child work. I'm an inner child therapist, a licensed inner child therapist, NLP practitioner, also Tantra practitioner, metaphysics. I've studied all Scientology. We can go through all that. A whole list of certifications and studies. But I remember at 8 years old when I asked my mother to come to my baseball game. This was a defining moment for me. I asked my mother to come to my baseball game, and she said, I don't know nothing about that ball. And she wouldn't show. And so that was the day that I made a decision at 8 years old that I'll show them. Right? And that's when I started really act out. And me showing them was me pretty much destroying my own life. Right? Me doing things to try to get their attention. because the only way I got their attention is when I acted out, right? When I was being a good little church boy, I couldn't get their attention. But when I acted out, I could get their attention. When I went to prison, they didn't miss any visits in prison. They came every week. But they wouldn't come to that baseball game, right? And so it's always about protecting the image. And being a PK inside of a small town, you have to protect the family's image, even though it's a dysfunctional family. And you have to try to play your role. And so, for me, I ended up moving to Washington, D.C., continue my addiction in Washington, D.C., and at the age of 31, I actually decided to get clean. And so now it's been 16 years of sobriety. Of course, I've gone through many studies since that time, Tantra and, like I said, Scientology. I was also ordained minister at 25 years old. The story can go back and forth. Ordained minister at 25 years old. I've done the National Catechism as well. I've traveled the world with some pretty, big names. I'm not naming any name. But I'll say this about the church, though. I remember at 19 years old, I was an adjutant to a female prophetess. And, it's funny, man, how I helped her build her ministry. And I remember we had left to go see Shirley Caesars and T.D. Jakes. This was before T.D. Jakes was even in Dallas. He was still in West Virginia at the time. And on the way back, she was 8-9 years my son. And she came on to me. And, I was so taken aback and offended by it because I looked at her as my pastor, as my leader. I would have done anything for this woman. And she came on to me, and it really left a really bad taste in my mouth. And so I ended up leaving that ministry. As I was in prison, there was another gentleman who came to the prison I was in. I really liked his message. He was very flamboyant, very flashy, Louis Vuitton, Versace, had a great message. And so when I came home from prison, I said, I got to join this ministry he's a part of. And so I ended up joining the ministry, and that's all most ministries I get involved with. I'm always, find my way to the top of the hierarchy. And I did that as well, ended up becoming the chief adjutant to the presiding prelate of this organization. And I had a very similar experience, where the bishop was also coming on to me. And so, before I killed them all, because I was about to kill them, that's another story, right? I was literally in the car. I was driving the Benz on 95, and some told me, just kill all of them. They don't even deserve to live, right? Now, I remember hitting the gas on like 110 on 95, and I just slammed on the brakes, and they all looking like, what's going on? Like, I think somebody would drive this car. And so when he realized what was happening, he gave me a nice, grandiose exit, very formal exit out, letting the congregation know that, Minister Kelly was going to be moving on his studies in Washington, D.C. And I covered them. I'm covering them to this day, right? I cover these people to this day. I never mentioned no names. I still cover these people only because there are many people that are still seeking, right? And maybe they'll find who they really are at some point. But because I am the person that I am, I have empathy for everyone. I don't want to hinder someone else's growth process. And it might sound like an oxymoron, but I want to hinder their growth process because for many people, that's all they have.
Well, that's a great segue, because now that you all three of you have shared your stories. What I want to segue, if you can pause for a minute there, and get right into what spiritual abuse looks like, because the truth of the matter is all forms of abuse. Sometimes we only pay attention to the ones that are the most violent and the most severe. And so when we talked last week with Minister Sandra, Elder Sandra Cheney, who's here today, and Nicole Watson, who is a suicide prevention advocate, that's how we actually got to anything about the church, is because of what happened already in our childhood homes and what, people, our own wounds that we have. And so you go to church, and most of us are looking for a safe place with God, kind of just like me. I heard Sheila say, looking for a place to belong. right? So now that makes us vulnerable, right? So we're looking for a place to belong. For some people, you move from church to church, religion to religion. And so listen, just because you're not in a church, I want to say this. This is why I'm going to read these symptoms on spiritual abuse, because Nicole made a point last week when she said you can be church adjacent, but you can also be a part of any religion and still have these traumas activated when you go into those communities, any religious community, any spiritual community. I just came out of a Clubhouse room before coming in here that was talking about the mystical science of the Bible. And they all wanted to drop the science, but they were so abusive and to each other. I had never been in a Clubhouse room. I think I stayed in there because my mouth was just open, doing research, preparing to come in here. See, this is what I'm saying. You can know about Egypt, you can be conscious and study the occult, but if you have not healed this and you start adding all this high science to your repertoire, it will catch up to you and visit you like a dark night of the soul. And if you don't know what a dark night of the soul is, it can be something that can make you have suicidal ideations or depression, or invite other types of spirit. A lot of women want to go rush to do tantra and kundalini training, but you haven't healed the blocked chakras. And when you don't heal the blocked chakras and you're talking about opening up to more orgasms, you're inviting ill mental health. So let me read these symptoms, and I'm going to open up to you all to share any of these that may jump out, make your belly jump, and then open the floor. And if you're listening on YouTube, we only have a few more minutes. Same on Instagram. I invite you to join us in Clubhouse, where we go a little longer. So signs of spiritual abuse. 1, spiritual abusive leaders twist the truth to make themselves look better. And you end up questioning if you heard them correctly or were misinterpreting something. Number 2, spiritually abusive leaders demand respect instead of earning it. Number 3, spiritually abusive leaders betray your confidence and share your information with others. Number 4, spiritually abusive leaders say you need to give up your free time for Jesus. You can say Jesus, the mosque, Allah, the bimbe, the akom. Come on now, the meditation circle. Come on, and shame you if you don't agree. Number 5, spiritually abusive leaders don't allow themselves to be held accountable or corrected and bully anyone who disagrees. Number 6, spiritually abusive leaders avoid your requests for conflict resolution, but are quick to confront you. If you try to bring up things they are twisting, and you are seen as unteachable or blame shifting. Number 7, spiritually abusive leaders make you feel you can't change churches. And again, I say mosque or circles or whatever, or you'll miss what God has for you. Number 8, spiritually abusive leaders demand their way over your free will and scare you with threats to your reputation if you don't comply, or shame you by bringing you up your past failures. Number 9, spiritually abusive leaders demand to be served instead of serving. Number 10, spiritually abusive leaders silence their critics by making them the bad guy. I'll do 2 more and then y'all can say ouch or amen. Spiritually abusive leaders don't give you credit for your ideas and successes, but take the credit for themselves. Spiritually abusive leaders bully, shame, or tease you into breaking your own communicated boundaries. And that's 12. There's 25 that I have here, and they were written by Jill Monaco to give proper credit to the author who did this. So I'll come back. I'll let us talk a little bit. I'll come back and start at 13 and share a few more. Then anybody, any of our speakers, of the 3 of you, have a belly jump before I open the floor.
I know for me, I I know for me, there was one, I believe, that you said about the spiritual abuse as far as leaders not owning, or thinking that they can be corrected, or in instances, I believe that was one of them.
Yes.
For me, that one, the bullying in return, that was for me because that's what I really experienced in the church from leaders. Even when George and I got married, we went to a church and it was a female pastor, and she was very abusive over the pulpit, to me expressly, not to George, because for her he was what she needed for the church, but for me it was as if she could see herself in me, I believe, at times, and parts of her that didn't want to be there because she was a witch, and I knew that then, and I didn't even understand really what that word meant. But I knew, now that I know and I look back on that time, she was that abusive witch pastor that didn't want to say she was a witch, but did had attributes of a witch, and acted like a witch. And so for me, my issue is pastors or leaders in general that cannot feel like they don't have any what's the word I'm looking for? Any help me, baby.
Pastors and leaders that feel like they don't have
they can't take any correction.
Accountability.
Accountability. That's it. Accountability. That think that they don't have to be accountable for their actions, but yet you can tell me that I need to fix mine. That's a problem for me. And so one thing that I didn't do as a leader was tell anybody anything that I myself wasn't facing or dealt with myself, and acknowledged, hey, this is where you got problems, and so you can't tell nobody about this until you get it together. And so for me, that's the number one issue for me.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate that. George, did you hear anything from that list you want to speak to?
Well, yeah, read the one again where you said that there's a demand respect, but don't, instead of earning it. Is that what you said?
Mm-hmm. Okay, let me go back.
It was like, yeah, it was that one. That's pretty much what you said. You said that they demanded, or a spiritual abusive leader would demand respect instead of earning it. And
yes,
that is a actual number one. It's a God complex. It's a number one attribute, because leadership, especially in the cloth, or like I said, depending if it's whatever religious affirmation, they feel like that, that they're God's gift to that program or humanity or that cult or that movement. And so because of their position, they don't have to do anything to earn the respect, the loyalty, and the love of the people. It's just automatic. I have a problem. Yeah, I have a problem with that. And so our philosophy was totally different. We believe, because that goes on where leadership, they building business, and they believe they build the church or the building or the mosque or the temple, the people will come. Our philosophy was different. We believe that if we build the people will build whatever vision we had. So if you build the people will build the building, even if you need a building or what have you. And so we always believed in building people and earning their respect and earning their love. You want to lead the church? Bye. We don't believe in cursing people if you want to lead the church or visit or go somewhere else, because we don't want anybody around us that don't want to be here. And I don't want to be around. I want to be around people where I'm celebrated and not tolerated.
Absolutely.
Period.
Absolutely. Now you all have people that you work with, right? And so do you attract a lot of people who have been churched and are now unchurched and seeking other things, and talk about the mental health aspect that they're working through?
Absolutely. Majority of the people that follow us are either people in church, people that are coming out of church, or people that are confused about why they're still there.
98% of our clients, our audience, our crowd, our circle. Yeah.
And we deal with the mental aspect of the church abuse all the time.
All the time.
With people, having to grow up in the church and be a certain way because that's how your family was. And, and it causes it causes a mental block within us, because they're like, again, that clone, that person that we're walking out somebody else's life. We're walking out the life that we think people want to see instead of walking out the life that we know we have. And so, yeah.
What's interesting, La Tonia, we're actually dealing with and mentoring a lot of pastors. A lot of pastors are coming. Lots of tons. How do I transition?
And that's what Bishop Pearson, before he actually even became as open as he is now, when he and I were talking, I can say this publicly now, We were literally working with so many ministers and pastors who wanted to transition, but was scared to lose their pension, y'all. Imagine.
Absolutely.
That's their way of living.
Absolutely.
That's how they pay their bills. And you have pastors that are still now in the faith that don't believe nothing that they preach, but that's their check.
It's a business.
So it's a day job.
You got to take care of his family.
We know lots of them.
And so we're helping a lot of pastors transition into motivational speakers, life coaches, authors, what have you, and transition their congregations as well. Again, like I said, we still speak in churches, and a lot of churches that bring us are churches that are trying to transition into an empowerment center instead of being a gospel teaching church.
Yeah. I have a couple of friends that just transitioned their church in DC, in the Maryland area, from that type of gospel banging church. I call it gospel banging. And to an empowerment church. And I still speak in churches, and I still have good friends who are pastors who lead churches. They invite me to their conferences. I love those because those are the ones who are, in my opinion, doing the real work, of Christ consciousness, which is freedom to be crystallized into one. So if you're listening today, no one is saying you have to leave your church, but if you are sitting there being abused and afraid through fear, then that is a form of mental abuse. Because what happens is when you leave, and I'll talk about me, when I left the nation, I remember something happened to my car. First thing I started thinking, was God punishing me because I was no longer under the covering and the protection of the FOI and all of that? And so I had to go through a lot of mental pieces around my relationship with God and understanding this metaphysical journey. Even though I studied the metaphysics and the universal law, which actually is what opened me up and where I found universal law in the Bible. See, and this is why some of my good friends in here, when they leave the church, they don't want to hear any reference to the Bible. But I wasn't called to do that. I was called to be a bridge to show you your freedom in that scripture, because the word says, who the Son set free, but we put it on some deity. But what is the sun? The sun is the soul. It's the solar power. And so when we look at biblio-helio text, it's about the study of the sun. But we have been given most of our religion through the slave master and still have a slave relationship to it. But we are here today not to get into that science. We'll have to probably do a part 2, another one or something. We are literally looking at the mental freedom and freedom from abuse, from the abuse and the trauma, freedom from the trauma. Because what we're talking about, everyone, is a form of trauma. And so if you have already been traumatized by poverty or rejection or abandonment or fatherlessness or whatever, molestation, any of those things, and then you go into what you think is a safe place, now you have another trauma. So then you hear theology that is now teaching you more fear, more guilt, and more shame on top of trauma. And not to mention, we aren't talking about people yet who in our communities have undiagnosed mental health issues, by the way. And so we're talking about traumas and layers. And trauma, I learned from a trauma therapist, doesn't just go away. Trauma doesn't just go away. So nothing's wrong with you, but you can easily think something is wrong with you. In fact, that's the first go-to place for many people who have been traumatized. Or what am I doing wrong that I'm attracting this? So Derek, did you hear anything when I read that spiritual abuse list? And then I want to open the floor up.
Absolutely. I can actually relate to all of those statements. I've actually experienced them all in one organization or another. As you just mentioned, when we lead from a place of trauma, when I went through my inner child training over the last 2 years, one of the things that I did, I reached out to all my spiritual friends who were spiritual leaders. And I asked them all to get this book, right, called Homecoming, Recovery the Inner Child, or Championing the Inner Child by John Maxwell. And I was telling them that, until you're healthy, you really can't lead from the front because you're going to be leading through your trauma and your abuse and your pain and your suffering. And so, it's so ironic how none of them read the book, but they still want to lead. Right? And again, I hold space for them as well. But it's just a sad thing how, as the Dope Soul couple just said, many people are afraid of losing their position, their pension, their payments. Being a chief adjutant to a presiding prelate, I had a chance to see and hear a lot of things behind closed doors. And like you mentioned, a lot of these people do not believe what they're saying, but it pays the bills. Right? And so, me being a spiritual person and one who does practice a lot of the modalities, I make my money outside of spirituality. That way I can bring integrity to the work that I do. Now, can I make resources through spirituality? Absolutely, and I do as well. That's not the bulk of my resources. And that's because I want to make sure that I'm always leading from a heartfelt space, not a space of lack or scarcity where I have to compromise my integrity to make someone else feel comfortable.
Right.
And so I'm always working on myself, right? I'm always becoming the best version of myself. And so, yeah, I think what happens is a lot of times, like you just said, when people aren't healthy, they get into, whether it's Christianity or Islam or, more, it doesn't matter what religion it is, they have a lot of knowledge mastery, but very little self-mastery.
Oh, man, where's my clapper? Doggone it. You just said a word right there. Say it again, Derek.
No, we need to, again, I'm an avid reader, right? I've read, hundreds of books. But one thing my mentor told me was stop being a knowledge master and be a self-master, right? Stop seeking knowledge mastery, but start seeking self-mastery. Understand why you do the things you do. Understand why you gravitate to the people you gravitate to. A lot of these people are gravitating to these churches, and it's a trauma bond. A lot of people are gravitating to these spiritual practices, and it's a trauma bond. But they're bonding from the vibration, the frequency in which the pain they actually operating out of.
Yes.
So the person is tricking you to grow. So I hold space for both parties, right? I have empathy for both parties. Again, I believe we're all doing the best we can based on our level of understanding of ourselves. Mm-hmm. But most people don't take the time to understand who they are and why they do.
Absolutely. That's good right there. So I want to open the floor and hear your voices. There's a few of you who have hosted conversations about this and like this before, and I want to welcome you to the floor. I don't know what your background is like, Unique. I know you might be working. If you want to add to this conversation, I'll introduce you properly. What you have to do is hit your mic or raise your hand so I can give you access to speak. So the floor is open. And don't be afraid, because when in my process of sharing these daily love notes during this month, we're building off of the teaching that I did earlier that's say yes to your voice. And so finding a way to say yes to your voice is being able to free yourself with your story. I think Inez, the mic is open.
Greetings, everyone. And thank you for inviting me to this Clubhouse chat. You invited me on Facebook as Facebook friends. I can relate to this because I'm a clinical sexologist, and I was a part of a summit last year, and we did a segment on church hurt, and the audience consisted of people who were polyamorous, queer, well, just say the LGBTQ, whatever label they want to go under. And it was when we had that conversation on church hurt. It was the most healing conversation I've ever had, because I've been a victim of church hurt, where I was too seeking various religions. And I studied and I chanted Nam Myoho Renge Kyo, all of that. I went to Catholic school, grammar school and high school and things like that. And how I was a victim of it was dealing with men who was also a victim of church hurt. And matter of fact, they still are a victim of church hurt to this day. So the thing is, I had to come to that, and I love what you said too. The gentleman said about self-mastery, because it's like, you got to do you. You got to do you. Because I have knowledge in the sexology. I've also done wellness from the alternative perspective in the beauty industry. But if you don't know who you are, then all of that knowledge, to me, it's great, but it's secondary, because you're not healing yourself. And it wasn't until I became, for me, a clinical sexologist, that the healing began with me. And then I realized I was also healing things that were in my childhood, as well as ancestral childhood, around sexuality. But it still stemmed from the church, because they say, you don't do this, you can't do this, God will punish you. It was always, I was going to be punished. And that took a long time to bust up.
Oh yeah, that it takes a long time, and you to do that. I've written a book, for those of you all who don't know, called My Juicy Rebirth. And I share the rites of passage, how the rites of passage opened my feminine, because it was Tantra that took me to another relationship with the divine, because many of us don't know our body as a prayer, our body as a instrument of prayer. And people, particularly in the West, who are orgasm chasing, just look for the orgasm, or they chase Tantra in order to make a partner happy or to keep a marriage together, but not understanding that when you enter into tantric studies, you are literally dealing with your direct relationship with the God through breath, through imagination, and through the chakras, to be able to open yourself to feel God and share God through your body. And so when I first started studying, my teacher is from he's from New Zealand, but living in Bali. And I remember when I got certified in tantric massage, I'm all ready to learn how to massage the body. We're like, oh yeah, like ready coming. And the first thing he did was busted all of that up. And he talked about how you all in the West, what you believe and how detrimental it is. And when the technique that I was taught had very little to do with touch, but location and energy exchange. And so we start off on these journeys sometimes think we're looking for something outside, but I love how George said earlier, it's our destiny. And that's what I love connecting the dots to. I see that one of my pastor friends, I don't know if you see me, Pastor Abe, if you can see me, she's on Instagram. She probably was in a meeting or something. Let me know if you're still there. But she hosts a conference where she invites these types of conversations, and she is a therapist. So she invites this into her ministry. So there are ministries that are growing and changing. The floor is open though for anyone else. If you all are still being shy, or my signal is slow, because I see somebody has their hand raised, and I keep giving permission, but it won't show here on the it won't show. So raise your if you have your hand raised, take it down and raise it again so we can unlock it in the system and you can speak and come to the floor. because I don't want this to just be a tell session. Us telling you. This is an opportunity for, and let me share with you what I'm saying. There's a difference between telling and sharing and coming to spaces just to be told. You're still putting yourself in the position of a parishioner, of a taker. But you all came here, each one of you, with some form of story, some form of expertise, some lens into how you've shifted and grown. And all of y'all want to inbox me, but this is the time to get access to the conversation, because I don't do all that on inbox now. Somebody already inboxed me. I'm gonna give you one pass now that I said that openly, and said, could we define a witch? And I do want to talk about that, because I heard you use it, Sheila. What is a witch to you? Because to me, it's just like the word pussy. It's just like the word bitch. It's just like the other whore, and the word virgin that we in the West have taken and made it profane. We've taken sacred words, or not we have, they have made sacred words something profane. So what is a witch to you when you use it?
Well, so when we say witch, we understand what that is, but we use that because, most people, how they identify with it. A witch was used, actually a derogatory term that was used for women when the world was being westernized and Christianized, because I don't want to get into that right now, but the world was flipped, as most of you understand that, it was flipped out, taken out the woman's hands and put into a man's hands. That's why I say that the feminine energy needs to be healed through the masculine. That's another show. But anyway, when they westernized and Christianized this world, they wanted to demonize women. And so women that were actually shamans or healers or light workers, you know what I'm saying, they started calling them witches. And they started creating these fairy tales and these storybooks of these old women with these hooked noses and warts and flying around on brooms. And so this was part of the demonization of women. And so now when we use that term today, that term is in the Bible. Suffer not a witch to live. In the Old Testament, all this talking about workers of paganism, workers, and I'm going to tell you why that's in the Bible. The reason why these things in the Bible stay away from astrology and necromancy and witchcraft and suffer not a witch to live and sorcery and all that is because they don't want you to know that the Bible was plagiarized. La Tonia said it's just the Helios Biblos. The Bible is just shamanism and astrotheology, or astrotheology and shamanism. It's all symbolism of the sun. The halo behind the paintings in Jesus' head is not a halo. It's the sun. It's mockery right in your face. They're worshiping the sun, and they have you worshiping a figure. And so when you understand these things, you understand that when they say, they want to give it to the witches, or they want to get rid of people that practice witchcraft. And when they say witchcraft in the church, they're talking about the arts, or the pagan arts, or root work, or energy work, or breath work, or even meditation, or awakening kundalini, or tantra. Okay, anything that's not biblical, so to speak. Now, if you want to get into church terms, what witchcraft is manipulation, domination, and intimidation.
Come on now.
All right. And so while you have people in the church that are calling people like us witches because we are practitioners beyond biblical studies, we are more in tune with ourselves and more in tune with nature and source, the universe. Now we're labeled as witches, but the real witches are those that are deterring people in the church from people like us, or causing these wars, or these wedges, or like La Tonia is platforming today, the church hurt. If you leave my church, you'll be cursed. If you do this, you do that. You got to do it my way. And I demand respect on your loyalty and your undying blind faith without. That's a witch, because real witchcraft, ladies and gentlemen, outside of the arts, real witchcraft is leadership that uses, watch this, manipulation, intimidation, and domination to get what they want. What it is turning one's will from their own to themselves. Because the word witch actually comes from the word wick, like in the candle, to twist and turn, twist and turn, twist and turn until it's all ingrained into one. So understand that leadership, or poor leadership, or witchcraft says if I can't manipulate you, in other words, if I can't manage you into or trick you into doing what I want you to do, I'll intimidate you or I'll scare you into doing it. If I can't scare you into doing it, i.e. heaven and hell, i.e. you're going to be cursed, so if you don't pay your tithes, you're going to lose your job. If I can't watch this scare you, then I'll dominate you. I'll force you. I'll bully you. And that's real witchcraft.
Much like what our government is doing right now, but we won't get into that.
Very much. So when we say witchcraft, or when Sheila says witchcraft, when they called her a witch, what they were saying that she was a practitioner outside of the Bible. She might, pray to something outside of Jesus. She may have a few crystals in her pocket. She may put a little something in the food or whatever. This is the things that they said, because I am a Bible Belt, Mississippi American gospel boy that was raised in this thing. I was a strong, devout preacher, right? And now all of a sudden, this woman is turning my mind and my head from my mama. And so my mama was in the May the Best Woman Win, and she came with and that's exactly what it was.
The thing when I said the word witch and they called me a witch is simply because just what George said, that it was his mother feeling like I was taking something away from her that she controlled, and now she has no more control over it, and so now I'm a witch. When in reality, honey, you're the biggest witch of them all, because he broke the control of your witchcraft, Pastor, to be free. And he became free when he found this witch over here. Okay? My spell broke her spell, right? I put a spell on him, and that's what happened. So when I heard the word witch back in that day, of course I thought about what they taught us in school with, the woman with the hat and the cauldron and and all that. And I didn't understand that actually is a part of who we are in reality. But it was a bad word for me, coming from the church. It made me feel like I was a bad person. It made me feel like I was evil. But now I embrace those attributes. I told George when I turned 48, I said, I'm ready to explore my dark side. And he said, excuse me? I said, you heard what I said. I'm ready to explore that part of me, because I've never been that person. I've always been the person that said, oh, I love you and love and light. But then I realized that there's a different light to me now. And there's a part of me that is needed in this lifetime. That's my upper and my lower.
And you're right.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to say this to the guys out there. If you're hearing our testimony, and we've been married for 25 years, and now she recognizes herself as a witch. She's a great witch. You know what I'm saying? But I'm going to tell you guys, don't knock it, because that witch coochie hit harder than
I knew exactly where he was going. I'm like,
I kind of had a feeling that
he knew it, right?
I had a feeling he was about to go there too, right? Yeah.
I'm so glad he was.
But that's because he's a good warlock. And so what you hear us doing is taking command over these terms, ladies and gentlemen, and taking the fear out of that, because medicine men and women were martyred. They were crucified and sacrificed because they did not cave into the status quo, much like what we're seeing today with holistic wellness doctors and such, who are sharing information and either losing their practices or losing their life or losing their livelihood, because it does not just stop here when we talk about the spells of religion. So, Derek, I hadn't forgotten about you, but we have 3 more people that have joined the stage, and I want Sandra, you join first. Then it was Sharice, Cheryl, and Chantel. So, if you all could take, maybe about 3 minutes to share before you land your plane.
Thank you, LaTonia.
Yeah.
I just want to say that this is a great conversation, and I am so glad that I am in the space that I am in, because I remember well before it, people were talking about tarot cards and all these other things. I was interested. I had them in my house. I had the crystals. I did all these things until I got, in church, and all of a sudden it became wrong. It became, that this was witchcraft and all these other things, which suddenly confused me, because I was one, when I spoke something, it manifested. But then when I got in church, And then the fear mongering and all those things happen. All of a sudden now I'm questioning, am I doing the right thing? And all of a sudden manifestation stopped. And then I couldn't, I couldn't do anything. So I became so entrenched in church because that's all that I had. And the day that I left church was because I experienced some serious church hurt. And I just remember asking God what happened, because I questioned everything, my faith. I questioned God. I questioned what I learned. And it took me a while. And that was back in 2009. And it's taken me a while to even get to this point. And I like what Sheila said about the dark side, because even for me, there is that side of me that I am now exploring, that I'm not that good girl, because I never was the good girl. I was always the girl that embraced who she was, because I was considered the black sheep. And although it was negative then, I embraced that part of me now. And so I'm in that space. That's the space I'm in, learning to embrace all of me. And the good, the bad, the ugly, crying through it, peeling the layers back, and knowing that it's okay, so that I can be who I'm supposed to be, and to be purposeful and be impactful now. In the space that I'm in, not because somebody else said this is who I'm supposed to be, but who I was meant to be, who I was brought here to be. That part, so I can be purposeful and have that major impact. So I love this conversation. It is really helping me, and it's digging me deeper into that self-mastery. And I like that, because that's the part. I stopped reading a lot, and now I'm focused more inwardly than I was outwardly. So thank you, LaTonia.
Thank you. Before you go, I do want to do a shameless plug. What do you think the Juicy process for women who don't know about Juicy did for you in terms of your liberation?
Oh my God. A lot, because again, in terms of my femininity, when I was younger, I embraced it. And I wore what I wanted to wear. But when I got in church, it was turned upside down. So that part of me was shut down. I just became a robot. Even, in my marriage, and I'm married now, but I was, I just did what I thought I was supposed to do. When I joined that program, it opened my eyes to me, to the feminine on the inside of me, that soft part of me, because I was so, we both have masculine and feminine. I know that, but I was more masculine than I was feminine, because I had shut it down. I shut myself down. I became the church lady. That's what I called myself, because I wore everything all choked up, and everything was covered. And that program opened my mind to me. Not so much I'm not talking about just sex. I'm just talking about to just really walking in my feminine power and who I am, and to love me more so inwardly versus outwardly, because I wasn't loving myself inwardly. I was loving myself outwardly. And so it really broke up so much of that hard ground, that wall that had been placed in front of me by the church. I had wrapped myself in a wall, and it was chipped away by going through that program, because now, feminine wise, I love me. I love my feminine way. I love all of me, where before I did not. So yeah, it was a great program, and I think everybody needs to go through it, quite honestly, because it was really good.
Thank you. As the juicy resident juicy butterfly, I had to because it comes up in the rites of passage all the time in terms of spiritual abuse. Thank you so much for sharing that, Elder Sandra, who spoke last week, and that replay is up, and she shared a piece of her story. And so I'm going to close out on YouTube. And if you're watching on YouTube, I'm going to keep Instagram going for just a little while longer. But Sharice, go ahead. And if you can follow the speakers, everyone here can just hit that button to follow the speakers. And follow us, connect with us. That would be so great. So that we can continue for our Mental Freedom Month.
Hello, LaTonia. I'm Sharice Virgo, and I was here at work, and I got a notification, and I saw the topic: overcoming church hurt, and that's what caught my attention. My dad and my mom are pastors, and for a short time, I was a pastor's wife, and I didn't fit in to box they tried to put me in. And so it was a lot of shaming. I spent most of my time in the church in fear of going to hell. And just listening to you and to Dope and Derek Kelly, I was so grateful to come across this because I felt like no one understood where I was coming from.
Wow.
And hearing all the stories, I felt like chains were dropping off as I'm listening to everyone's story. And that were a whole kitchen witch, all of that. I heard I wouldn't accept the title as prophetess, you know, so then, of course, the psychic medium and all these other things. So it was just a lot of shame, and I'll keep it short, but I took so many notes, and I'm looking forward to following you and to Dope and others to continue to learn. But I definitely wanted to say thank you for having this and discussing this topic today. It took me to another level of feeling free.
Oh my goodness.
And, it's just so much to share, but I just want to say thank you to all of you for sharing this story.
Thank you, because you know what? It's people like you that I just felt that my spirit leap. So Sandra, your story opened this up, and I can't see everybody yet that's in the galley. But Nicole's story opened this up last week, and that is the power of community. When I say tribe up, and this is why I say don't just hide by inboxing me in the DMs, comment on posts, come be the one to share the story, because you are setting somebody else free. You're being in service to someone else, even by serving your own voice being released. So thank you, Sharice. You are welcome. Welcome home, my sister. If you want to chime back in when you hear something, if you have a question about a term that's used that bumps up against your faith, ask it, because we are not coming trying to trade spaces. We have studied and shown ourselves approved, and to ourselves first. And let me say this, I'm not one of those who are out here saying don't have a teacher or elder. I think that's dangerous too. You got a lot of young brujas out here and so-called witches and all these folks who are out here telling you don't need to have a spiritual circle. You don't need to have an elder. But it is because I have accountability in spiritual community, because I have elders who, when I bumped up against walls where I wanted to fight or flee, I was able to be supported. I was able to be reparented. I was able to have a new reference point of what it feels like to be vulnerable. And it is very helpful for people who have the microphone or in the front to be coachable, trainable, and teachable. So Cheryl, I'll pass the mic to you, and then Chantel.
Thank you. Can you all hear me?
Loud and clear.
Okay, good. Thank you so much. I'm just so appreciative of what everybody has said so far, because my story, a part of it is like many. I haven't been a minister's wife or a PK, but I can tell you I started through high school in the church. My mom took all of us to the altar to get saved. And it was from that point on, I think I got traumatized with the church. She was ready to give her life up into something because of the way she lived, but the trauma happened just through me and my experience with her, and so she was ready to make a change, and I guess that was her way of protecting us. But what she did was
thank you for watching on YouTube. Tune in on Clubhouse to the replay. Inbox me for more information.
And then she believing what the church